This time on The Greats, the Wright brothers discover the miracle of flight. From Hanoi Jane to human rights campaigner. Albert Einstein, the man behind the genius. And Queen Elizabeth II, monarch of the century. But first, he was a powerful orator, a charismatic leader, and one of the greatest Americans of all time. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a revolution in the 1950s and 60s that ended racial segregation and pushed civil rights to the forefront of the political agenda. King excelled academically and graduated with a PhD in theology. He was only 24 when he became pastor at a Baptist church in Alabama and quickly gained a reputation with authorities for being an agitator.
Well, the jail experience is never an easy experience. The loneliness of jail, the frustration of jail, the lack of communication with outside always brings with it real problems.
King rocketed to prominence as the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, a response to Rosa Parks' arrest for refusing to give up her seat to a white man, as required under the Jim Crow law. King was arrested and his house firebombed during the campaign, but it led to a United States Supreme Court decision that the segregation laws were unconstitutional. King found himself tapping into a powerful mood for protest and change. Feelings ran strongly within the African American community, and he opposed violence, and through the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, made churches the forefront of the struggle for racial equality. King's success as an agent for social change was viewed with suspicion by the FBI, and they put him under surveillance in an attempt to gather evidence that communists were infiltrating the civil rights movement. No such evidence was forthcoming, so the agency attempted to blackmail King into abandoning his public role. It threatened to reveal potentially embarrassing information gleaned from wiretaps and bugs, but King refused to be intimidated. An admirer of Mahatma Gandhi, King traveled to India and said, "Since being in India, I am more convinced than ever before that the method of non-violence resistance is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for justice and human dignity." The March on Washington for Freedom and Equality was King's most famous protest. 250,000 Americans from many different racial backgrounds marched on the nation's capital to demand an end to racial segregation, legislation to ensure racial equality, and protection for civil rights workers from police brutality. It was at this demonstration that King gave his historic speech, "I Have a Dream." The following year, King became the youngest ever recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize and had the ears of the world when he delivered his acceptance speech.
I must ask why this prize is awarded to a movement which is beleaguered and committed to unrelenting struggle.
Throughout the 1960s, King worked to build bridges between civil rights groups and mobilize social protesters. He took his family to live in Chicago's slums to highlight the injustices faced by northern African Americans. King also spoke out against the Vietnam War, questioning why the United States government was propping up the dictators of Southeast Asia. He met Nation of Islam leader Malcolm X many times, but refused to renounce his policy of anti-violence. King's politics made him the target of hate from a range of people, and he constantly faced threats of violence. But the civil rights leader refused to be cowed. On the evening of April 4th, 1968, he was standing on the balcony of his motel in Memphis, Tennessee, when an assassin fired several shots at him. An hour later, King was pronounced dead at the hospital. An entire nation was plunged into mourning. "300,000 people attended his funeral, and many millions more mourned the man who, more than any other, had brought lasting changes to the conditions and attitudes endured by black Americans.
And we know that as long as the Negro in this county, as well as over other sections of the state, can't vote, then many of the other conditions that exist will continue to exist.